at Pittsburgh School of Law. He's a labor and human rights lawyer and an author. A lot of people, I suspect, like me, were heavily involved in Nicaragua solidarity in the 80s. But after the revolution fell, as it were, had to turn their attention elsewhere and hadn't really refocused. Tell us why people should.
Yes, well, as you know, in 1990, the Sandinistas stood for election. They were defeated, really under the threat of continued war by the United States that was supporting the Contras. And the people essentially capitulated and said, okay, we want the war to end. Sandinistas were voted out of power, and they stepped down. What began was 17 years of neoliberal policies in Nicaragua, which were devastating to the poor and working people. And finally, in 2006, the Sandinistas were reelected, which was a major blow to U.S. policy in Central America. And what they have done since that time is not given enough credit. Let me just throw out one statistic. The UN ranks Nicaragua now 5th in the world That's an amazing feat for a Central American country. Since the Sandinistas were reelected and took office in 2007, the economy has grown by almost 5% every year. Poverty has been reduced by around 40%. And now Nicaragua is nearly 100% food sovereign, meaning that they grow nearly all the food that they eat, and they're now beginning to export food, including to Venezuela.
Venezuela, is that going to be visited on Nicaragua? Are they headed into the... Because what you've got now is more or less total war, short of actually firing missiles between the U.S. and Venezuela. Is that the direction that Nicaragua is now headed?
I fear that that is the case. In fact, in late 2018, the U.S. Congress passed and Donald Trump signed into law what is called the NICA Act, which is a very punishing sanctions regime against Nicaragua, which cuts them off from almost all international financing. For example, from the IMF and the World Bank, financing the Sandinistas were using to reduce poverty, to build housing, to engage in other social programs. This is the same thing they're doing to Venezuela. And we know that they have been funding violent groups inside Nicaragua. In fact, funding reconstituted Contra groups in Nicaragua to try to challenge the Sandinistas, who will be up for election again in 2021.
How is Nicaragua's relations with its surrounding countries, the rest of Latin America?
Well, they've been good in many ways, but because of the U.S. isolation, a lot of countries have then followed suit and isolated them as well. But what is undeniable is how stable Nicaragua is. In fact, the interesting thing is that while Trump talks about his concern for the migration from Central America to the United States, Nicaragua is not a Central American country that's producing many migrants to the United States because it is so stable.
Well, this is one of the factors. Obviously, there are just like diaspora in the U.S., but less so for Nicaragua.
That's right. That's right. And certainly, there's very few that are trying to come in up Central America into the U.S. through the Mexican border, again, because of what the Sandinistas have done. And now, of course, the U.S. is risking that by trying to wreck their economy, as they have wrecked Venezuela's economy.
Their policy is going to produce refugees heading north. There have been many setbacks for people with your perspective on Latin America. Morales, you talked about, is now in exile, I think in Argentina.
Yes.
The Venezuelans are under siege. The Nicaraguans soon to be under total siege, certainly under the early stages of a siege at the moment. There was a moment, we're old enough to remember when it was, I mean, we've seen all this musical chairs before, but we are certainly old enough to remember when Latin American social change was the hope of the world, and it's all being rolled back, or in danger of being rolled back. How pessimistic are you about the coming years?
I'm not pessimistic.